Karl Rove is a former White House Deputy Chief of Staff and Fox News contributor, but yet in this policy, if they go forward, they'll forgive $10,000 in debt, but they're not going to change anything in regards to the rising cost of tuition, as Senator Leahy was just talking about.
No, they aren't. And so, add to inflation, add to the deficit, look completely political. This is all about buying the support of college students and recent college graduates whom they worry aren't going to turn out to vote. I mean, this just stinks from top to bottom. And it's a sign of the desperation of the administration, but it's also a sign of their willingness to bend the boundaries in order to achieve a political goal.
The truth is, school is absurdly expensive. We can agree on that. But you got to look.
Absolutely.
You got to look at where the cost is coming in. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But this does nothing to that. In fact, it encourages it. And not only that, but remember, we're going to grant a special privilege of debt forgiveness to a small group of people and have every taxpayer pick up the tab, not only today, but in the years to come, because this is $300 billion added to the deficit, period, end of story. This is not paid for. This is not, offsets. This is nothing. This is pure addition to the debt and inflationary demand. Now we've got a bunch of people out there saying, God, I feel better. $10,000 of my obligation have been wiped out. I'm in a better place. Let's go spend more money. And once again, the government is making the inflation problem worse by putting more money in to the system, more demand, and having it paid for by debt.
You got to imagine what Senator Manchin is thinking now after he signed on to the Inflation Reduction Act and cited the deficit reduction. So-called, yes, I know. Yeah. Just one more question on this before we ask you about those election results from yesterday. The NAACP president, Derek Johnson, on student loans said this, that President Biden's decision on student debt cannot become the latest example of a policy that has left black people, especially black women, behind. This is not how you treat black voters who turned out in record numbers and provided 90% of their vote to you to save democracy in 2020. And then Congresswoman Nina Turner, she wrote this, that canceling $10,000 in student debt when the average white borrower is $12,000 in debt, while black women hold on average over $52,000, isn't just unacceptable, it's structural racism. So those are some pretty strong words, and that means that, so the right's not going to be happy, and the left is also not going to be happy. So you go through a policy that doesn't make sense, is likely illegal, and you don't get the political payoff either, Karl.
Yeah, exactly. And where's the authority for, you bring up a good point, where's the authority for the president to do this? If you look at the language, there has to be an extreme emergency. And I thought listening to the White House that the economy is going and blowing and everything's good. Jared Bernstein was on this network the last couple of weeks a couple of times, reminding us, telling us in glorious detail how great the economy is. So what authority does the president have to do this? He's got one authority. I want to help Democrats in the fall election and juice turnout among younger voters, and I hope to God they feel that they will give us their vote in return for being bought and paid for.
Let's talk about last night, Karl. I know you got a whiteboard. You can show us here. What the media is going to be writing about, clearly, is that there have been 4 elections since the Dobbs decision late June. And in all 4 of those elections, Democrats turned out in higher numbers on a percentage basis than they did for Joe Biden 2 years ago. Does that carry weight for you? How do you examine that?
Well, first of all, one correction. They didn't necessarily turn out in greater numbers. They gave a bigger percentage of the vote to the Democrats in special elections. These special elections had
a higher percentage. Continue.
Yeah, so the lower turnout than in the presidential election. And this is something Republicans ought to look at. In Nebraska won, which incidentally, the first campaign I ever managed was a congressional campaign in Nebraska won. The Republican won by 5 points, but Trump won by 15. In Minnesota won. The Republican won the special election by 4, but Trump won by 10. And then last night we had 2 elections. New York 19, which the Democrats won by 2.2. Biden won by 1.5 in that district. But if you look at what's called the partisan vote index, it's a +3 Republican district. And New York 23, where the Republican won by 6, Trump won by 11. And the PVI, the partisan vote index for that district, is +9. So what I deduct from last night is and from these others is the Democrat base is energized in a special election, and particularly New York is a little hinky because There are more registered Democrats in 19 than there are registered Republicans, but the Republicans tend to turn out and vote more, but they didn't in this election, and similarly in 23. There are more registered Republicans than there are registered Democrats, but they didn't turn out either. The PVI is +9, the Trump vote was 11, and the Republican won by +6. So the Republicans had better pay attention to the get out the vote effort and try and do after-action analysis to figure out why the Republicans aren't turning out to the degree that they should. My view, Democrats are energized to some degree by the Dobbs decision, by abortion, but I think the real issue is why is the Republican vote depressed? It's not turning out to the degree that it should turn out.
All right, well, that's to be examined. Yeah. Karl, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Karl. More to come on that.
You bet.
Thanks. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.